So now that we have our table created, let's create our pivot table. See, pivot table, like in my opinion, is like the coolest thing about Excel. And I know we all use Excel differently, but a pivot table allows us, if our data is structured the right way, to find answers so quickly to our data. So like if we had questions about, okay, out of all the employees that were hired in 2008, which department has the highest salary? Or out of all the people who were hired in 2008, who has the highest salary? Or we could say, which department has the highest average salary? Or say which position has the highest average salary? Or we could say, for example, starting at the first year, which I'm not sure, maybe it's 1999, to the current period, how does our average salary change? Are we paying our people more or are we paying our people less? So, I mean, it allows us just to quickly find answers to those sort of questions. So to create our first pivot table, I first want you to be aware that our data has to be structured like this, meaning all of the data in each column is related to each other. So like in column A should be all of the employee IDs. There can be blanks. Like if we didn't have one employee ID, it would work. Ideally, we don't want blanks. And then like everything in column F should be the position, and everything in column H should be years with the company. Everything in column G should be a start date. All right, and if you get data from a database, or if you have the opportunity to design the data that you use, for example, I was looking at one of the finance spreadsheets, and they have a sheet with like many, like I don't know, 60 or 70 sheets, and each sheet is maybe a cost code, and then in that sheet they have all the costs or the costs or income related to that code, and instead of like having it in different sheets, you could organize it in this way to where you would have the cost code, the transaction type, whether it was an expense or an income, and have that here. You could have like a reference number, and then instead of like going through and adding it to a different sheet or like a sheet that references a different year, we could just have a column that had a year, and we could just, if we wanted to add a new, for example, course or a new student, we could just add it here to the bottom of our sheet. And I do have an example of that I will share in the class, but I just want to talk about that. So I noticed that I'm in here. I'm going to just delete my record. So delete that. So to create the pivot table, all we have to do is select anywhere in our table. And it's the same as when we create a table. We either have to select just one point inside of our data, or we have to select all of it. If I were to do this and then insert a pivot table, look at that. It actually worked. But sometimes it's not going to work, and it will just try to create it off of that range. But this worked, and you can see that I'm pleasantly surprised about that. All right, so we'll just move forward with what we have here. This is what our pivot table, and actually let me go back because I didn't really walk you through how to do it. So let's click once in here. Under insert, we have pivot table. All we have to do is insert pivot table. Click on that. And now it says select a table or range. So we have our employee info table, and that's the name that we gave it. And where do we want it? We just want it on a new worksheet. All right, here's your first pivot table. Yours will probably say pivot table 1. I've created a few just in this video that I've deleted. So mine says pivot table 3. Yours will probably say pivot table 1, and your sheet will probably say sheet 2 or 3. Probably 3. All right. This doesn't look like much, but this is the bare bones to our pivot table. So if I click outside, see what happens. Like this, what was over here disappears, and if I look over here, I don't see any pivot table ribbon. So if I click inside of it again, now you can see I get these new menus here. The pivot table analyze and design, and then I also get these pivot table fields. Sometimes if I were to click out of these, fields actually go away. So if I did click in here, I don't get these fields, but I still get these up here in my ribbon. I can go here to my pivot table analyze, and I can just go back here to my field list, and I can re-add that. So if I do that, then all of a sudden here I get my fields. So here, if we look here, each one of these represents one of our columns. So we have employee ID, last name, first name. If I come over here, you see employee ID, last name, first name. So each one of these represents a column. And basically with a pivot table, we want to first understand our data and what kind of questions we want to ask. So if we look here at employee info, we have salary information and we have, say for example, department. Let's go look and we can ask the question, which department has the highest average salary and which department has the average lowest salary? So those are the two questions we're going to answer right now. Let's go to our pivot table and let's think about what data do we need to answer that question. So which department has the highest and the lowest average salary? So with that, we know we want the department. If you just click on this, right there on that check, it will put it into my rows. So you can either do that, you can either check it, and I'll see if I uncheck it, it'll disappear, or this is what I normally do. I just click and drag it. So if I just click and hold on here, I can drag it to wherever I want. And the reason I do that is it gives me more control of where I want it. So let's put it in the rows, and we'll talk about what all this means here in a second. So this is my rows, this is my columns. And what does that mean? If I were to just take my department and put it here in columns, now look, I have it in, it's here in a column. If I put it here in my rows, now it puts them down in the rows. Let's go get our salary. So let's put our salary here, we'll grab it. And if, for example, if I were to just click on this, Excel will normally, since salary here is numerical, most of the numerical things is automatically going to be put into our values. And we put things in here, the things that we actually want to like sum, or we want to average, or we want to count. Those fields go here. Does that make sense? And if I really wanted, I could move that over here. But that's not very useful, because what it does is when I put it here in my rows or my columns, it puts every single unique value here is as a label. So every unique salary now is put into a column on its own. If I were to put it into my rows, it does the exact same thing. It puts every single salary that's unique to that department under the department. And this is really cool, actually. If I were to move the salary above the department, see what happens? Now there's only one department that has this exact salary, and that's in product development. And then the next one, this exact salary only has one department, and that's ENF, which I'm not sure what that is. And let's just redo this. I'm going to move department over here above salary, and then you can see this might make more sense. Now for this department, here are all of the unique salaries. But I mean, really, we don't want to see that. The pivot table should allow us to analyze the data easier. So what we normally do is when we have a numerical value, we put it into our values. And automatically, if you look here, it says sum of salary. So it automatically sums all the salary for each department. So here's the total salary for this department, the total salaries, like all the added salaries for this department and for this department. But what we wanted was the average salary. So how do we get that? If we come back over here to our values, there's a drop down, this little arrow. If we push the arrow, we go to value field settings. Let's click on that. And this gives us all of the options for how we can analyze our data. In this case, we just want our average. So let's click on average, push OK. All right, this is great. This gives us our average salary, but there's a problem here. It does not look very pretty. So let's just go, I'm going to highlight the data and I'm going to make it a currency, and I'm going to remove the decimals. All right, so now here we have the average salary for each department. If I wanted to know the highest salary, I could easily just, if I were to click here, I right click and I can sort. I'm going to sort the largest to smallest. Now I can see that product development has the highest salary, and FIM, which, what is that? I'm not sure what it means, but this department has the lowest salary. Now somebody wanted to talk about like charts and pie charts. When we create a pivot table, it makes it so easy for us to create a chart. So say we wanted to actually visualize the salaries. All we have to do is click inside of our pivot table and go to Insert. And then here's all of our charts. Let's just click on recommended charts to see what it does for us. And now with the data that we have, these are all of the charts that we can create. So if I were just to go down, we could look at all of the options here, some. So look at this. You can't create this chart type with data inside a pivot table. So it really helps us figure out what we can create and what we can't create and what it might look like. Personally, I would just prefer this clustered column chart. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to push OK. And now we can see quickly the average salary for each of our department, which is pretty awesome. So if you were just taking this information to figure out which department you wanted to move into and money was your only concern, which department would you want to go into? It'd be product development here because it has the highest average salary. Now, say, okay, well, that's great. They have the highest average salary, but what about their retention rate? Should we go look at the department that has the highest retention because maybe they have the lowest retention? Maybe it's not that fun working in that department because you have to work a ton of hours. So let's go and figure out what our retention looks like. So what would retention be? If we look at our data, we have our years with our company. So we could use this and we could figure out, okay, which department has the highest average years with the company. So let's go do that. Let's go back to our pivot table. And this is going to be easy. So if we click inside of our pivot table, we could also do it inside of our chart. We click inside of our pivot table. Instead of our average salary, what we can do is click and drag that and just throw it out. What we want is our years with the company. And we'll just click and drag and put that into our values. It summed the years with our company. What we want is average. So let's go to value of filled settings and go to average. Push OK. Wow, that doesn't help me very much because, well, there's one, HR. So HR is the best department. When I do this, I normally want to sort it from highest to lowest. So it's just the highest number is on top and the lowest is on the bottom without having to go and find one that's in the middle. So let's just do that real quick. If I right click in here, I can sort, and I want to sort it largest to smallest. So now it changes my chart. And I get to see now which department has the highest average retention. So that would be HR. Product development, let's look at that. They have the lowest. So on average, the employees stay there for 9 years, whereas on average, people stay in HR for 11 years. All right, let's go look at now what else we could do with this data. Let's go and figure out how many employees were hired on each year. And I want you to pay very close attention to this example because this is so real in the fact what we're going to do here with our dates, okay? So let's go here and I'll just create a new pivot table. And honestly, one of the easiest ways to do is if I just highlight this whole pivot table and I'm highlighting just the pivot table. And I can do a Control C. So copy. I could also just right click and copy. And then I'm going to come down here and right click and I'm going to just paste it. So now I have an exact replica of my previous pivot table, which just gives me the backbone to change it. So what we want to find out now is how many employees were hired in each year. So let's think about what do we need for that information. First, we need our start date. So instead of department, I'm going to just get rid of our department because we don't need that for this, but we do need our start date. So I'm going to put that into our rows. Okay. You see what it automatically did? And this is new. Like the older versions of Excel won't do this for you. It automatically grouped the years and all the data. So it grouped it into years. And you can see that now I just have year 1995 all the way to 2013. And if I were to expand on one of these, it will give me every quarter inside that year. And then I can also expand that out and it will give me each month within the quarter that has data, which is super nice. It makes it so easy. What if I just want years? I can easily just now come here where it has my quarters and my start date. I can just go take those out of my pivot table and now I just have my years. So now I have all of the years in which employees started. We need to figure out how many employees started in each year. And for this, we have here here's all of our employees and here's the years. Basically what we need to do is we just need to count every employee that started in each year. And that makes it really easy for us. I'm going to pull this out. And when I'm counting, you can count any kind of thing. You can count numerical, like things that have numbers, or you can count things that have names. And normally when I do counts, I want to do something that's just like the employee ID. I can count the employee IDs because those are unique. But it really doesn't matter. It will just count how many rows are associated with that year. So I'll just do employee ID at first. I'm going to pull it here into my values. Because employee ID is numerical, it will automatically assume that you want to sum it. We don't want to sum the employee IDs. It makes no sense to. What we want to do is we want to count the employee IDs. And right now we have it formatted in the currency. So I will just come up here to custom. I'm just going to make this a general. All right. So now we have here are years that people started and the count of employees. So these would be how many employees started in each year. Let's go and sort this from highest to lowest. Well, actually, no, we're not going to do that because we can chart it now and it will be based on year. So let's select here in our data. Let's go insert. And what I really want to do is I just want to insert a line chart. So if I insert this line chart, now I can see how many employees were hired in each year. What I was curious about was maybe as the company grew, they would hire more and more people, but it really looks pretty sporadic. So who knows what was going on with their company at the time. But if I were to go and sort the data from largest to smallest, like I wanted to do a minute ago, let's just right click this here and sort largest to smallest. And this would be nice to know like which years we hired the most, but you want to know that it's not chronological down here anymore. Now we can say in 2005 we hired the most number of employees, followed by 1999 when we hired 11 employees, and then as it continued down to 2004 we hired our fewest number of employees. So that could be interesting depending on how you want to look at your data. All right. So let's, I want to show you something that makes this really nice and why we want to do a table. So if we come here to, I think under design, let's look, select data. So our data, actually, let's go here, pivot table. So I was under here in design, but that was for my chart. What I want to be here in my pivot table, and I think it's under pivot table analyze. Instead of what we want to look is our source data. So change our data source. I'm not going to change it, but look, it's just referring to our employee info sheet. So that's okay. I'm not going to change it. I just want you to see this because now, say I were to go hire an employee, say me again, and my employee ID will just say is 3000. You can type in your own name if you want. And we're going to be in PDev. And we'll say we are a manager. And then you can choose whatever date. I'm going to just choose, let's say like a date 2 years from now. So 11/29/2018. And then years with the company. This is actually coming from a formula. We could say that. We could calculate it right now. I'm just going to put a 2 there, just for time's sake. And then let's say If you put your own name, for me, I'm going to say I make $500,000 a year. I am the best employee for the company. The reason I'm doing that, I want it to be ridiculously higher than everybody else so we can see that it actually makes an impact in our data. So if we come back here, we have our average years with the company. Let's change that and let's go back to our average salary. Okay, let's go back here. I'm going to remove average years. Let's go look at average salary by department. And now, see right now it's sum. We need to change that. So value field settings. Let's go to average. Okay, and I'm going to sort largest to smallest. Product development, here we go. It actually didn't change the average too much. Now, actually, let's do something here. I added that data, and a lot of times when you add data, what we need to do is now refresh it. So my pivot table is referring to what is kind of in the memory before I changed my, before I added my record into that list. So one of the things we have to do is if we go to pivot table, we click on it and we can go to pivot table analyze, we want to click refresh. And that will just go pull the new data. That's the only thing you have to do if you add new records is you have to just refresh it. So as soon as I refresh it, now look at the average salaries for product development. It is significantly higher. You can see that my record was pulled into there. And that makes it like literally, this can save you so much time if instead of you entering data into like so many different sheets, if you organize it in a way that you can just add it to the bottom of your table and you can differentiate it by adding like a department code or expense code or whatever it is, it differentiates one sheet from another. It could be like academic calendar year. You could just have that in a column where you could enter the academic calendar year. And then as you add your data, all you have to do is create the pivot tables that give you the data you want. You only have to do it once. And then in a year, as years go by and you have new students or new teachers or whatever it is that you're looking at, all you have to do is just go to data and refresh, or you go to your pivot table and analyze and refresh the data, and it will automatically pull in all the new data for you. And so if you're creating reports all the time and charts, if you can create a pivot table and do it once, and then all you have to do is just add the new data to your table and then refresh it, and all your charts are updated, like that's going to save you so much time. Okay, let's see. What is one more thing I can show you? I want to show you this. So let's click here in our pivot table, which gives us the number of employees that were hired in each year. If I were come down here and say I swap, instead of years here in my rows, I'll put them on my columns. I need to move this. You can see what happens. Now it just shows it in this way. So in 2005, I had 12. It doesn't work very well though. If you look at my chart, it just throws my chart way off. So the best thing to do is if it's not working the way that you think it should, you can always just start playing with your data and move it around and see if it does what you want it to do. So as I put this sum back in here, I need to go change it. It automatically just went to sum. I'm going to go back to count. So you can always just play around with it. And then the last thing I want to show you is this filter. Filters are super nice to have. So say I wanted just to filter it by department. I could just go in here and put the department above my years. And now it's broken down by department. I could put a department here in my legend, or not my legend, my column. And now I would have, here's all of the years, here's all of the departments and how many employees started in each department. Or I could add a filter for my department. So if I drag it over here to filter, now I just have a drop down and say I only want product development. And now here is a chart that shows just the employees that started in my product development department for each year. And I can do that for, pretty much whatever department I want. So that makes it super nice. Or if I want all of them, I just go back to here and I select all. So that little arrow here allows me to filter which departments I want to show. So I could do select multiple, and now I could just choose a few departments that I want to see. So it makes it super easy to, we call it slice your data, and be able to get information out of data like so quickly.